Okay, wonderful. We will call the meeting to order here at 9:30 promptly. As we can see, attendance, everybody's here in person. And I'd ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Councillor Mackay, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's that the February 17th, 2026 agenda be adopted as presented.
Perfect. We can move that to a vote. Wonderful. That passed unanimously. Okay, I guess we do have one presentation this morning. Mr. McKnight, you're welcome to join us at the presenters podium. You will get 5 minutes to present. At 30 seconds, you'll hear a bell, so don't let that shut you down. It's just giving you a warning. And then after that, if there are any questions, we can continue the dialogue with council once your presentation's over. So whenever you're ready to start.
Test mic, test mic.
There you go.
Let's get this open here. Can you guys see? How do I get the pictures on to the screen? Okay. And is my time going?
No, we won't start it till you begin speaking.
Okay. Okay. We'll start with the river lot here. Ready whenever. Okay, so I don't know if any of you frequent the river lot very often. It's a wonderful spot. First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've never done this before, so bear with me on my trips and flub ups. But I frequent the river lot often and I ski very often. I actually skied here today, thanks to Mother Nature and the beautiful snowfall we had. And one of the things that I've noticed is not really missing, but it kind of is missing in the river lot, but that could help create our community strength, bring in events due to safety issues. It would also allow us leadership in a certain natural frontier. That leadership being, next slide, please. Nature bridges is what I'm getting at here. Can I go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, so this is a natural bridge in Banff. You've all probably seen this before. Driving through the NE Parkway, you've seen nature bridges for the animals, and as well, we would be utilizing it for people. This is an example just down the road at Crossing River's Edge by Norencall. I don't know if any of you know that area. Right before the base, this is just an underground train bridge arch as an example for you to get in your brain about what it would be. Now, the space that I've noticed could be utilized is right here. This is the Sturgeon County St. Albert line, right? And what I've seen is that if we put a natural bridge right here, it would allow something like this as the entranceway into town, right? You would go across the top, walking the river lot. You would not have to cross the road into lower river lot. It would then unify river lot as one, right? Because there would be no road crossings, no need for that. And then if we do it right, I believe it can attract enough attention to bring national or provincial events like cross-country skiing events to the river lot. Yeah. I think, yeah, it takes the blocks are sandstone, which is a stone utilized in Alberta often. It's what we have in Edmonton mostly. The red brick and clock tower is obviously our clock tower, but shrink down as like just an homage to the clock tower / this building. The bright murals would be the art standard of it with whatever. Put an Alberta flag in there, mountains, anything, something bright because it's a tunnel. And then across the top there would be, this is just another one. Wooden sign, I believe, would be the way to go. This is coming into St. Albert from Sturgeon County. Again, another type of design. I chose the arch because this is a direct, this is literally existent 5 kilometers away from Riverlot. And I believe this would be the most affordable option. Tentatively, I've looked at these as being around 50 to 60 grand for the arch, the steel arch, right? And this being a train bridge, it has the structural capability just for people to walk across kind of thing. Next, we go to, these are just wooden, you know, obviously across the way here, we would need wooden guardrails. And I believe like a natural wood finish like this, some kind of thing would help with snowdrift as well as full integration of, you know, full integration of Alberta and St. Albert kind of thing with the sandstone. We would grab the wood from the white spruce Nuns Park. There's obviously got to be some dead wood over there that could be used for that, to integrate it all as one thing. So there's that. And I believe the natural wooden design would be a much better way to go than a milled type of design, not just for decor, but also for functionality of like the snowdrift and whatnot. But for decor, it would help as well. And then in the summertime, it can be used with the botanical park can jump in and put some flower pots and make it beautiful with, you know, integration and pulling everything together like that. And then that would be like the far end of town, Big Lake, and then this would be the other end. And it would also be a connector for the pathway. Bing, bing, bing. And this is another Riverlot map to show where it would go as the course, the Riverlot Classic, 15K, blah, blah. And directly on Sturgeon Road, I tried to get a good rendering, but that's all you get.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
we go.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for
All right.
the presentation. I know it feels.
thank you
rushed.
for,
Yeah.
thank you for listening.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll open it up to if there are any questions by council, and I believe Councillor Cortash will start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McNutt, for the presentation. Just a quick question. How, is it possible right now to connect from the north to the south lot? You just take your skis off? Is there do the
No,
trails
there-
meet
there's
up?
no
and-
connection. That's why it is upper, lower Riverlot, and I believe this bridge would make it Riverlot. It would unify the two together as Riverlot, and it would also help as with cars slowing down as they come into Sturgeon, because that crossing is, you kind of have to stare the cars down because they want to rip by even when you push the button and stuff. So that would also aid with that.
Sure. I was just wondering, are there trails on each side that meet up? You just have to cross the road, or?
You just have to
I'm
cross-
familiar with the trails on the south side, but are
You
there?
cross the road right here. This is a road crossing right here. So the bridge would be over
Okay.
here at the.
Yeah, there is
this
a trail there,
The
okay.
Sturgeon County, that's the Sturgeon County, St.
Sure.
Albert border, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, that's crossing, yeah.
Are there any other questions by, Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for skiing down here. I hope that wasn't you behind my car on the bumper. You've seen obviously right in that same location, the notification, the 127th Street's gonna go there, right?
Yeah.
There might be an opportunity when that comes in.
That's,
And-
that's what I was also thinking about.
Yeah, and so, we have no time frame on that,
Mm-hmm.
because you would really want to be a little premature and put something like this in.
Before all the
Bef-
construction happens,
before
but
all
the
the-
borders are not going to change, correct?
Correct.
That's the key
Yeah,
point.
yeah, it's just the design of what that will look like.
Yep.
And so there might be an opportunity to do it in conjunction with that, and then you might have 3 municipalities in the province.
Exactly. And I'm guessing the road is not going to be expanded,
Oh, we don't know yet.
like just this specific one going into Kingswood area and
Yeah, yeah,
whatnot.
it
It
might
doesn't
be,
seem to be.
it might be 4-lane now.
Yeah.
It might go from 2 to a 4-lane, just so that it merges into the rest of that on Sir Winston Churchill. You know, as you come in off of the river lot and you turn left, that becomes
Yeah.
Sir Winston Churchill.
So
right?
yeah, but that corner turns
Yeah.
into like the single 2-way lane,
Yeah,
right? But they
yeah.
they would want to expand that to 4.
Yeah.
Okay,
They
okay.
could, They
Yeah,
could. I mean, it would make sense, right?
yeah, but that hill is, that's what they were gonna originally do on that hill, weren't they? And then
Yeah, and
they
we
kinda
might
gave it
end
up.
up eventually having to make Poundmaker Road actually residential.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like your idea. I think that's really kind of interesting and thinking ahead. Because yes, I've tried to go from lower to upper and you got to cross over the fence, then
Do
you,
all that.
yeah, so it's much safer to go to the other side.
And
Yeah,
I do believe the flow of it would be what would attract the skiing
yeah,
community, like for provincials and, you know, that flow, because the river lot is such a beautiful resource.
sure is.
You understand that?
Yeah, no, I walk it frequently, except for, well, I was starting to walk it a little bit more up until
Yeah, the ice.
yesterday.
Yeah, the ice
Yeah.
is horrible.
Anyways, thanks, ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for your presentation, your idea.
Thanks kindly for listening.
Great. I don't think there's any other questions. So to echo Councillor Mackay, thank you very much for the presentation and, yeah, have a wonderful
Yeah,
day.
much obliged. I would just
Thank-
like to finish with, if it's done right, it would be the attractant. I believe so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Kindly.
Okay, moving to part 4, I don't believe we have any business arising, delegations or announcements at this time. So I'd ask for, someone to make a motion for the adoption of the minutes from our January 20th, SCAL meeting. Councillor Clark,
That the Standing Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of January 20th, 2026 be adopted as presented.
thank you very much. We can move it to a vote. And that passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we are just flying through this. We'll go to our new business and for information, we'll go to 6.1, which is regarding a presentation around the youth transitional housing project. As noted, this was, I brought this forward just to get some more information. I know there were some decisions made in the past on how we got to this. And now this will just maybe open up an opportunity to determine if we still want to go down that road with that property. So, I will turn it over to Mr. Fletcher to start the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I won't offer much by way of introduction. I'll let the team certainly do that. But you'll note that as you look forward on the agenda, there's sort of 2 related items to this. One is the youth transitional housing, which we're going to talk about today, and that is tied to the former Fire Hall 1 site currently based on some direction from the previous council. Coming up, you will see redistricting for the former Fire Hall 1 site. That is not related specifically to youth transitional housing. That is required for anything you're going to do on that particular site. So I say that only by way of separating those 2 components a little bit. Though they are related, they are distinct in terms of the way we're approaching it. And the decision on the land use is actually not specifically related to the youth transitional housing, but rather on the redevelopment of that land more holistically. So hopefully that didn't muddy the waters too much. I'll turn it over to the team to talk about the youth transitional housing specifically.
Thank you. Good morning. You can hear me, I trust. So good morning. My name is Connie Smigelski. I'm the Senior Manager with the Community Services Department. I'd like to introduce my colleague beside me, Vlad Rubin. He's our Community Services Social Housing Coordinator. Together, we will be providing an update on the Youth Transitional Housing Project and the next steps to advance this project forward. We also have available administration from engineering, planning and development, and economic development to support any questions you may have. We will provide time at the end of this presentation to answer your questions. This project, as you will hear through this presentation, has been in the works for several years, starting with the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness in 2018, and has included several council motions. The project focused on identifying gaps in youth housing supports, evaluating community needs, and exploring best evidence practice from comparable municipalities. Throughout this process, we engaged with local partners, reviewed provincial guidelines, and assessed potential operational frameworks. The goal of this initiative is to offer safe, stable, and developmentally appropriate housing options while connecting youth with the supports necessary to build life skills, pursue education and employment, and successfully transition to long-term housing stability. This vision has guided every stage of our planning and continues to shape this recommendation we're presenting today. Multiple city departments have supported our endeavors in this journey. Today is not an exception. We rely on their support. I'll just let this presentation catch up. From 2020 to 2025, Council and Standing Committee of the Whole advanced several motions supporting youth transitional housing. These included directing an administration to develop a capital project charter and operating impacts for a new youth transitional housing and investigating operator interest. In 2020, administration was directed to develop a capital project charter for construction of a new youth transitional home. In 2024, administration issued a request for interest to determine interest from operators or partners for the provision of youth transitional housing. And in 2025, administration began the process of developing a bylaw to remove the municipal reserve designation for 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue, a process that would enable the land to be donated or sold for a nominal fee to facilitate the development of youth transitional housing in St. Albert. To provide some background, in 2018, the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness was created to respond to the rise in homelessness in St. Albert. The task force researched housing options for vulnerable groups in St. Albert, identifying youth to have the fewest resources and the greatest need, recommending transitional housing programs for vulnerable youth. Further research was needed to support this project. The City of St. Albert engaged City Spaces Consulting and Covenant Health Vancouver in 2023 to conduct a youth transitional housing feasibility study. Building on the 2018 Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness, the study confirmed the need, reviewed development and operational options, and recommended actions to move a youth transitional housing project forward. On September 10th, 2024, administration shared findings from the feasibility study with Standing Committee of the Whole, resulting in a recommendation to issue a request for interest to identify potential operators for youth transitional housing in St. Albert. The RFI drew interest from 9 operators.
To reinforce the project, we are providing results from the Community Social Needs Assessment conducted in 2024. This assessment identified emerging social issues and trends and highlighted emerging housing instability among youth in St. Albert. Service providers, including the Community Village and Food Bank, Family Resource Center, Child and Family Services and Mental Health, identified youth as one of the most underserved groups in highlighted mental health, domestic violence, food insecurity, suicide, poverty, and discriminations as issues in crisis. Among 259 youth surveyed, many identified housing affordability as a major concern. Overall, 80% of respondents rated homelessness, supportive housing, and housing affordability as very important and in a crisis state. These findings clearly demonstrated a growing urgency around youth housing instability in the city of St. Albert. Building on this foundation, the Youth Transitional Housing Feasibility Study explored these issues in greater depth to better understand the local gaps in support and services. City Spaces conducted interviews with youth and housing professionals, held 2 youth focus groups, and visited youth housing sites across Edmonton regions. Findings showed that St. Albert youth often must travel to Edmonton for emergency shelter, demonstrating a significant gap in local crisis supports. During the consulting phase, local professionals reported that 20 to 30 students per high school were regularly couch surfing and facing increased risks such as being subjected to violence and exploitation. Youth homelessness often go unnoticed. Many young people do not sleep on the streets. They sleep on friends' couches, stay in unsafe homes, or leave St. Albert altogether to find shelter in Edmonton, leaving their communities, schools, and support networks. This youth, typically between ages 13 to 24 years old, may be dealing with multiple risk factors, including family conflict, trauma, mental health challenges, suicide threats, poverty, and offer nowhere safe to go, leading them into very much crisis situations. Youth transitional housing creates a safe, supportive place where young people can live temporarily, while faced with risk factors to get support with education, employment, life skills, counseling, and rebuilding healthy relationships before they reach crisis. By keeping youth close to home and giving them the right supports on the time, transitional housing prevents long-term homelessness, reduces harm, and helps people build stable future within their own community. Real experiences of youth homelessness in St. Albert were shared with City Space in key informant interviews and during in-person meetings and site visits. The examples cited here were provided by school representatives, St. Albert Community Village Food Bank, and Youth Empowerment and Support Services. While there is a general agreement that many of St. Albert youth fall within at risk of homelessness and provisionally accommodated definitions, St. Albert youth actively experience all types of homelessness, including living in encampments and emergency shelters in Edmonton. The real risk that St. Albert youth will learn street survival strategies while being homeless in Edmonton, and this will influence their behavior when they will return back to their community.
City Spaces released their findings that highlighted the necessity of a location in close proximity to required social services and supports. 3 potential sites were identified to test potential location-based scenarios for a new youth transitional housing facility. All sites were located close to services and transit. The 3 sites included 13 Mission Avenue, 70 Boudreaux Road, and 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue. After evaluating parcel size, proximity to services, and transit access, 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue was identified as a preferred site. Identified on this map, you will note that 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue is within walking distance of the provincial building with services including mental health, children's services, and income support. Also within walking distance of the library, the FCSS branch of community services, the outreach school, the mall to access PCN and further education, as well as the community village and food bank and the transit center. In June 2025, administration returned to council looking for support to move forward with 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue as the preferred site option for youth transitional housing. This parcel of land is located at the southwest area of St. Albert Gardens. The site previously housed former Fire Hall 1. The site's most recent assessed value is $541,000 based on current zoning, public, private, and institutional service, which could be reflected as an in-kind contribution. The original 1.2 acre estimate for the site was reduced to 0.41 acres after subdivision setbacks. The subdivided parcel's limited size constrains the potential for any substantial developmental projects. Council has demonstrated significant leadership on this project, starting with the Mayor's Task Force to End Homelessness. Through land donation, the city can further advance securing a youth housing project and provide often needed first-in support to move other funding partners. On June 10th, 2025, council directed administration to prepare a bylaw to remove the municipal reserve designation for 16 Sir Winston Churchill Avenue. A public hearing date is scheduled for March to remove the municipal reserve designation. This process is required so the land can be sold, leased, or donated. Once the designation is removed, a request for proposal will be issued to identify an operator, and administration will return to council to request the support for land donation. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for this opportunity, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the update in the presentation. I would open it up now to questions on behalf of council. Councillor Cortash.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks very much, Ms. Migalski. This is excellent. The background and having opportunity to read through this and kind of find out how we've gotten to where we are. It was very, very well done. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this to get to this point. I do have a number of questions, just as I'm not as familiar with the project as some of the veterans on council here for sure. The model that's being proposed for the transitional housing. So the report talked about a youth hub or youth support center with integrated services. And so is the idea that this facility would have supports for youth other than just housing? So would youth be able to access supports through this facility, whether they're staying there or not? Yeah, sorry, I saw you nodding, but yeah.
No, thank you for that question. So there's a couple of models. The one model, for example, in Grand Prairie that I was lucky to visit has all the social support services on site and medical service on site, so a nurse on site. And they're funded through Kickstand, through the Kickstand funding. We are in meetings right now with Kickstand, and there is an open proposal coming for potential support center, a youth hub center. I don't know that we're going to get that opportunity, but we're hoping, and there would be funding available through that if we did. And the intent is, as you just said, is to have those supports located potentially at the same site to allow for ease of access for services for those folks who need it immediately.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Kickstand, but I'll circle back to that. And one of my other questions, so throughout the report, it speaks about an operator, and I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So an operator would be an organization, not-for-profit organization or charitable organization contracted to run the facility, but this would be a St. Albert facility, like the operating expenses, I think it mentioned around $1.5 million a year. That would be the city and whatever other funders we can find paying for that, but then run by an agency, right? Is that essentially what I understand? Is that right?
So that was not the intent at any time for the city to have any ownership on this model.
Okay.
And so the hope is to find a partner or an operator that would take it on from the ground up. And so having a contribution available to whomever came forward as that partner just would help secure some additional funding to get the project going.
Okay,
But yeah.
okay, I'm glad I asked because I wasn't clear on
Yeah.
that. So the operator would then build and own the building. And so what would the city's role be in, so donating land, but then in terms of operating the facility on an ongoing basis, is this FCSS funding? Is this operating? Is this anything to do with the city on an ongoing basis?
No,
Oh.
the intent is that it wouldn't have the city wouldn't be operating this.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I've got a couple more. Maybe we can go to, I'll try to regroup now, but maybe we'll go to the next one.
No problem. We'll go to Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation this morning. I had a few questions with the definition of youth, like 13 to 24 is a pretty broad range. Say someone, is in need of, resources in the facility at 13, could they stay at that facility for essentially 10 years? Or what's your time limit?
So those kind of details would be defined once an operator is in place, but I could speak again to Grand Prairie because I was lucky to visit it. And they do actually have housing available for 13 to 24 years old. And the 24 age is what the provincial youth age is, and that's why we use that number. And so, yes, you could co-locate those individuals. And the way they do it in Grand Prairie is by different layers. So I think it's 3 stories high. And so separating the younger from the older in that way. But it is done not only in Grand Prairie, I know it's also done in other youth or transitional housing facilities across the world. So it is feasible and it is possible.
Okay, and then my next question is, of the 9 operators was that more local? Like I noticed the 2 consultants were both out of BC, so are your operators Alberta based or what region are they from?
The 9 operators that expressed interest were St. Albert and Edmonton region.
St. Albert and Edmonton. So you're saying local operators that are already doing something else in St. Albert are?
Some have expressed interest, yes.
Oh, okay. And those are nonprofits that would be funding themselves, not the city funding them?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That's all my questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe just a quick question regarding the operational capacity, and you said different age groups on different floors. 13 to 24 is, to Councillor Bermanski, is a broad range. Like, is this expected to be 9 stories, or like, how are you planning? How
So
would you do that? Because safety is certainly a concern. And just speaking around some of the safeguards that are in place on how you do that.
yeah, again, those details would be developed and designed once an operator's in place. Again, the city doesn't want to own or operate or build the facility. But examples that I know of, in not only in Alberta, but across the continent, I've seen as much as 3 to 5 levels on them. And so in a space like this, we're not looking at hundreds of people being in the space at any one time. You're looking at, I would say 30 to 50 at any one time as a maximum would be a best guess.
Okay, and are they typically kind of, once you check in, you're there until they believe you don't need to be there, or how does that work? You have to leave during the day, or?
Yeah. So it depends on the scenario. So if you're dealing, so for example, we'll go with the youngest, a 13-year-old in need of housing support. Because of that age, Children's Services would either be involved and or get involved and look at the way and how to do reunification with the family or family members or long-term housing. So that would be an example of a 13-year-old who's just in dire need of immediate housing. So then if you look at somebody who's 24 years old or 18 years old, models that I've seen have small, with a bedroom and a small kitchenette spaces so that they could have their own living space, but then you would be working with them so that they're out in getting education, with employment. So the doors aren't locked. It's not like a shelter. It's not like a shelter that you see in Edmonton where at 8 in the morning the door is locked and everybody out the door. It's not the intent of this kind of project. There would be services available all day and people working with the young people there all day. Again, building life skills and reunification with family and friends and people in their circle.
Great, thank you for clarifying. We'll go to Councillor Cortash, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regional questions. So would the facility be regional in nature? I'm not sure how these things work. So for example, Jesse's house in Morinville, is it St. Albert residents can access that facility, vice versa? The youth from areas outside St. Albert, would they be able to access facilities? So yeah, that's the question. Is it a regional facility? Is it just a St. Albert facility? What's the vision there?
So that's a really good question, and just Martel Foundation's a really good example. What they do, because they built it as a Sturgeon facility and St. Albert facility, is they allot so many spaces per resident of St. Albert and Sturgeon and then open it up to the region. That could be a model that could be looked at to ensure that St. Albert residents have first point of access, and then ensuring there's so many spaces available for them and then open up to the region. Because as we know, if you build it, they will come, for sure.
And so is that up to the operator then to
It would be.
determine that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the other questions I had are with respect to next steps. So I understand the redistricting will be coming, whether related to this project or not. But in terms of some of the other steps that were identified in the report here, so things like reducing permit service fees or I guess just moving forward with the project, what are the next steps aside from redistricting first and then go out for RFP for an operator?
Can I just jump in? I apologize. I misspoke when I said redistricting. Actually, what's coming forward is the removal of the MR designation. MR, as you know, can't be developed, so that's why it's distinct. The genesis is youth transitional housing, make no mistake, but it's distinct from that. So I apologize for using the word redistricting. It's the removal of the MR designation. So then go ahead from there. Thanks.
Yeah, so next steps after today's presentation is for us to put a request for proposal out to find an operator, a partner, somebody interested in building and going forward with this project. And then would come back to council with some kind of an ask potentially for a land donation.
Okay, and so no council decisions required at this stage. That's how it's going to proceed. You're going to go forward with the RFP and carry on. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's it for now.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're ultimately looking to council to provide a donation of the land, but this is going to be operated by a private entity, how do we have any assurances that it will kind of meet our vision? Can you address that?
I think that's also a great question. And the intent would be as if we want to put this out and if the city doesn't want to be an operator of this, then we would of course be taking a bit of a risk. Although you would be looking for a partner who's got a similar vision. The other way to do this is for the city to own it and have the city's vision. But that's not been the intent moving forward to date, is for the city to have any ownership. But again, through the request for proposal process, we can have a vision and find an operator with a similar vision to move this project forward.
Yeah, maybe I can just jump in on top of that as well. You can also make sure that the land transfer is caveated with certain requirements, right? And so the land doesn't transfer unless a certain vision is met, right? So there are mechanisms by which the city can ensure that this meets the city's needs.
Okay, and I guess to clarify that, I guess my vision would be that we ultimately have the ability to obtain ownership back if ever the entity that chooses to go forward, just a comment. The other concern that I have is we're talking about long-term housing prospects, but we appear to certainly have more homeless youth than we would have available space. And that's a concern for me if we're not going to ultimately put some parameters on length of stay. Have you given any thought to how we would ultimately be able to provide services for those that need a safe place to stay, but the beds are taken up?
That's a good question because it's really, really tough to know what the exact need is when you're dealing with young people. They're not visible. So our best guess is what we know today. The hope is that based on our best guess, we would have a facility that could house those in need. Also, again, when you're dealing with a younger population under 18, so 17 to 13, you would get children's services involved, and there's housing through foster placements that route. So again, it's that first point of entry, but at no point do you ever want young people staying in a transitional housing on a long-term basis. You want to try to unite them with family and or extended family and or friends for stability. So the intent isn't long-term housing. And of course, sometimes you're going to end up with some folks who don't have the option for anything else. But I don't see that. I wouldn't see that as the norm. I think for the most part, the operator would be looking to get young people moved out of there as quickly as possible.
Okay, and one last question, just for clarification. How many homeless, notwithstanding youth, how many homeless do we actually have at last count within the St. Albert area?
Yes, so through the data that was obtained through the food bank, for 2025, we had 262 homeless individuals. And many of them are youth. And in 2024, we had 268 individuals.
And out of that, about 100 are youth or?
At this point, it is really hard to have that data simply because many of them are hidden. And the point, food bank just gets one side of homelessness.
Okay, so they weren't able to identify the demographics within that 260.
Yeah, at this point, this data is not available.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bermansky?
Thank you. Come up with another question. With regard to the land donation and the request for different operators, was the option of the operator leasing the land ever mentioned to them or discussed with the possible operators as a direction?
So when we did the request for interest, we didn't go into that kind of detail. So those would be the details we would have to have conversations with an operator once one came forward. So that kind of detail's not been discussed yet. There's no operator in place yet to have that discussion.
So there is a possibility that the land could be leased then?
Lots of options could be available, absolutely.
Okay, and then I'm a little bit puzzled by the 30 to 50 per high school, the number that you mentioned for homeless youth or couch surfing youth. And I know that when this first started out, like a number of years ago, we were like at 12, and now, you know, I mean, I'm not sure the accuracy of numbers when you don't have details. That's the difficult part, because I mean, do we need this space to serve St. Albert, or are we opening a space that's going to serve a much larger region and, you know, and decide which persons in St. Albert are covered first, which we don't really know the answer to how many there are. So has that been discussed in the planning, that you would always dedicate the facility for St. Albert first?
So the intent, I would make an assumption, because of course we don't have an operator, but similar to the Disco Martel Foundation, where they have so many beds designated for St. Albert and Sturgeon, and then so many beds regionally. So I could see a model like that, similar to that in St. Albert, where you would designate so many beds first for St. Albert and then open it up to the region. And you're right, that's a really difficult number to get. In 2024, when we had our consultants on site, anecdotal evidence from our partners in the community and educators and young people was at any point in time, they knew of 20 to 30 young people that were living rough, living homeless. But that number is a very difficult number to get with that clientele, because they're so well hidden. They're not typically on the streets. They're on a neighbor's friend's couch or.
Right. Okay, and then another thing that was a little bit confusing to me is, you know, you mentioned that you'd have different floor for different age groups and such, but then it was also mentioned that 13 to 17, they're placed in foster homes. So a lot of times that would mean they wouldn't remain in St. Albert at that age group. So how would they ever connect back to St. Albert? Say they're in a foster home 13 to 17 or several foster homes for that matter. And then we're just leaving the space for 17 to 24. How do you connect the background to that?
Yeah. So it would be no different if a young person's in a foster home through Children's Services. The intent always in that world as well is to reunite that young person as quickly as possible back into their community with family and or extended family or friends. So it is a similar model, and I know as somebody who was a child protection worker at one time, that's the intent, is to get those young people out of foster home as quickly as possible, if possible. And I'm not saying that's always gonna happen, that they're gonna be in foster home. There could be situations where young people would be staying in youth transitional housing for longer term. It's so unknown. Every single case that would come before you would be different and unique, and you would have to look at all those options available to that young person when they walk through that door.
Okay, so would that mean that the transitional housing would be more for adults, 18 to 24? Classified as youth, rather, sorry.
So the reason why we went with that age range is because those are the ages we know in our community that have fallen in need of housing or transitional housing and immediate support. And so that's the intent of that age range. And it's also a similar models throughout the entire province. So you would want to have available some beds for someone as young as 13, 14, 15, and all the way up to the 24, because we know those folks are in need in our community.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So, okay, so I'm a little confused. So you're saying if they're 13 or 14, that they would they could go to this facility, but at the same time they're 13 or 14, they would be more eligible for foster care. So wouldn't really the intention be that if they're 13 or 14 and they left home, that it would be to go to foster care?
That's always one route that Children's Services looks at. In a lot of these models, provincially, Children's Services actually will pay for annual funding for a bed because sometimes there's a foster placements don't work out for these young people. So I would hope in this case as well, Children's Services would be putting annual funding towards this type of a facility to ensure we had beds available for those who couldn't go into the foster home situation. Maybe there weren't foster homes available for the many unique situations that arise.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, just trying to process this all, so that we could basically become a foster home for youth, that the province would be paying money towards, because I know that they pay foster parents to foster, so we would be de facto foster home.
I wouldn't look at it in that way because the facility that we have a vision of would be somewhere where young people would be getting immediate housing for those in need, also getting those support services that you don't have available in a foster placement. So those support services are so important to the success of this young person when they walk in the door, and that makes it very different than a foster home placement. So I wouldn't say what you said would be accurate for the vision for this.
Okay, I'm trying to piece this together. So, and then the operating we're thinking is 1.5 million. Would that be the city's expectation to support for a subsidy, or is that combined with like that? I'm assuming that there'd be some payment from the partner. So is that our expectation of our commitment would be 1.5 million?
So there's no commitment right now at all to council. So the hope is after today, when we put a request for proposal out and find an operator, that we would come back to council with an ask potentially for land donation. But there is no other request before council right now. No request in front of council. Right
Yeah,
now.
I think to your point, Counselor, that the idea would be that it would be self-sufficient and the city would not have to fund the operating costs.
Okay. When I looked at the backgrounder, it said that everybody that had brought forward either wanted a land donation and or a subsidy. So I understand that the goal is self-sufficiency, but it sounds like that's probably not going to be possible.
So a land donation would be a way of helping the project start, move forward. I know in the last couple of years of a couple of grant opportunities that came available, which we couldn't apply for, we weren't at that point yet. But having some dollars already available into a project like this helps secure long-term funding. And so having a donation from the city could help solidify some other provincial or federal partners for funding.
Yeah, I'm talking about the operating though. So I understand, we'll talk about the land in one more minute, but the operating. So, because looking at the expectation that I haven't seen the information requests or the proposals. So a request for interest, I haven't seen those. So I just don't know if it's actually realistic for us to say it'll be cost zero at the end after the donation of the land.
Yeah, maybe I could jump in. I think it's a fair statement, Counselor. We're sort of early stages now, right? And so the definition of that, but 100% can't put our hand on our hearts and say that. The intent would be that there'd be zero operational costs, right? But to come before council and say that unequivocally prior to any detailed discussions is a fair statement. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and then I don't believe the city can actually just donate land. We have to still sell it at market value, or is it that we can donate it? Yeah, well, I just want to understand this.
Yes, there are certain provisions in the MGA that we would be required to comply with, but it is possible to dispose of land at less than fair market value as long as those MGA provisions are complied with.
Okay, and this would fit under that?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So, because what I'm trying to figure out, you said that there's going to be different floors for different age groups, and then also different floors for different genders. So that's a lot of floors, and we're looking at 16 potential beds?
So I was only using examples of other facilities in the province. I don't know what this facility would look like. It's too soon. We don't have an operator in place, and so of course they would have a vision. It could be one story. I have no idea what we would be looking like for the future of this project, again, because we don't want to build and own this. So again, models I've seen in the province have been 3 to 5 stories, but I don't know what St. Albert would look like.
And we're looking at, it says the task force recommends a maximum of 10 beds. And I think before the discussion was 16. So I realize, again, we haven't built it, but is the intention now 10 beds?
So the recommendation from the task force was in 2018. And of course, the numbers have increased then, hence the numbers that we've seen in the report from the consultants in 2024.
So how many beds are we anticipating?
Again, I don't have an answer for that because we would need an operator in place to make a lot of those decisions because they would have ownership over that. So what you saw in that report were recommendations based on what we knew of at the time in 2024. 10 to 16 beds would house our understanding of those most vulnerable in the community at the time.
Okay, and if it's in here, please forgive me, but I don't remember seeing how much we're anticipating this to cost to build. Because I mean, obviously the number of beds matters, right? Because it'll affect the total cost.
Yeah, they're just going to look that up. Again, it'll be a ballpark figure insofar as obviously a detailed design would drive the cost, as you're well aware, Councillor.
And we would not be expected to pay for this. We would just be a land donation.
At this point in time, that would be the only potentially what we would be coming forward. I couldn't speak to the future, what an operator could be asking for. At another time, they could be coming and asking for other grants. I don't know. I don't have that answer yet. It's too soon.
Okay.
So I think just as we're looking it up, I think that's ultimately the crux of the issue for council, right? A lot of the questions, good questions on how this would operate, what form it would take. That would be the whole point of the request, right? Is to come in with a concept in terms of what the facility would look like, what the intent would be, and how you'd manage a number of these concerns that you've put together. That would drive the decision on which operator ultimately would go with should council decide to continue to pursue this course of action, right? And so until that time, we've got comparators and we've got speculation, and then we've got, those things that I think we would caveat any potential city support with to ensure that it met the needs of St. Albert. Go ahead, Vlad.
Yes, and so according to the consultants, the potential cost of building is around 8 million. And we also conducted some studies all across the province, and there are 6 youth transitional projects, youth transitional housing projects or similar. Quite often they're mixed with other resources. and that's excluding Edmonton and Calgary, and that that we know. And out of the six, the operational budgets ranges from 360,000 to up to 2 million. And the main sources are usually grants, donations, or municipal fundings, just for only one.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm back on. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I realize we've been going down this path as this has been the decided solution. And I don't know, I'm just going to ask if have we actually even kicked tires at the idea of doing a rent subsidy program as opposed to actually building this and moving forward? Because we could do a rent subsidy program for significantly less and still provide opportunities if we so chose.
Thank you. That's a great question. And we have had a very successful rental subsidy program. The problem is for those under 18 that can't get into rental situations because of their age. And so that would be very successful, or it would be successful for someone over 18. However, with those young people who may be in a vulnerable, precarious situation, they wouldn't again have supports, much needed supports available to them with a rental assistance program. We would continue to try to work with them as we do right now with St. Albert residents, but it would look a bit different with just a rental assistance program and wouldn't support anyone under 18.
Okay, so if you're over 18, we could do this. And this is going to go from 13 to 24. So really 18 to 24 we could develop a rental subsidy program specifically for at-risk at that point. And then the 13 to 17, ultimately, what we're saying is the foster care system in some way is failing them. And so therefore we'd be taking over because they could be going to foster care. They could be coming to us and then us helping facilitate them getting foster care.
So Children's Services is already doing that. So there's gaps in that system that's leaving some of our young people vulnerable and not housed. And so that system is working as best as it can. Again, it doesn't catch every young person from 13 to 17 for various reasons. There are models in the province where Children's Services, because of the lack of foster homes or the kind of foster home a child may need, they put funding into these kind of models to have 1 or 2 beds for those that are falling through the crack because the foster placement doesn't work. So that would be an example. And again, yes, for anyone over 18, rental assistance is one option to support housing. It doesn't give them any supports that they need. And those young people are quite vulnerable typically and haven't had the life skills that they need because of multiple family situations. So would be lacking the opportunity for that immediate social support that they truly need.
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions from this. So in St. Albert, do we have a lack of foster homes? Because you mentioned some parts of the province, but we're dealing with S. So do we have a lack of foster homes?
I couldn't answer that question, but I could get information from the province if you wanted. I don't know the number.
That would be helpful. And the other thing is, when you say that there's additional supports, so specifically, what are we thinking we're providing? Counseling or beyond that? Because we could also provide counseling regardless of where they live.
So it's counseling, it's employment support, it's life skills support, it's cooking, it's teaching those initial life skills that young people who have been unhoused from 13 up didn't learn. So it could be a multitude of different supports that they need. It's not just counseling, and certainly we are supporting young people best we can right now with counseling. That's only one of the things that the young people need who are vulnerable today.
Okay, the only other question I have, I guess I'm going to look to you, Mr. Fletcher, is that there's an intention to change this from MR to non-MR. And I feel like in some ways from the public's point of view, they're not completely aware. I understand we're having this discussion today and I appreciate that, of the intentions of what's going to go onto this property potentially. So it's like, we're just changing it to MR and then we're just going to get requests. And then all of a sudden it's changed over and the public's kind of unaware of everything going on behind the background. Everything just seems like we're just until all of a sudden we're doing it. And at the same time for council, we have a lot of questions about how would this work before we actually agree to do anything. So is there any opportunity for us, in camera, not necessarily today, to have a further discussion to understand before we even change over the land, what we're potentially looking at for the reality of what we might be building.
We could absolutely schedule an in-camera discussion to dive a little bit deeper into this situation. I think some of it would absolutely be public, some of it would be in camera, so you can have that deliberation. I think we can schedule that certainly. I would just again caveat that should you wish to change it, that's fine. But the MR designation, whether you build a high rise or a youth transitional house, there will have to change at some point in time.
So that really the changeover isn't the problem, but then if we changed it over from MR to just, what would we be changing it over to? Sorry, forgive me if,
You're getting me, but it's public.
Councillor Hughes, are you asking about the districting that you're? So it's PPI, so it's public, it's park, private institutions, public-private institutions, yeah.
okay. So if we do change it from MR to PPI, it does limit it to, like, let's say that ultimately council chose to sell that land or do something different with it. It would have to be redistricted again. So changing it from MR to PPI isn't, it does limit its opportunities for what the build could be.
Sorry, so just to clarify, it's PPI currently, and it has an MR designation on it, which means that only certain things can be operated on there. So the next step will be an application, a public hearing, and a request for council to remove the municipal reserve designation so that other things can be done on it besides those restricted by the MR designation. It will still remain PPI. If somebody wanted to build something on there that is outside of the district of PPI, then there would be another public hearing to make an application to redistrict.
Okay, now I understand everything. Thank you very much for all that. No more questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. In your experience with other organizations that operate in this space, are there some that typically build their own buildings, or is the expectation, because from what I've seen, they're often leasing or having subsidized opportunities to operate in them? So that's part one. And then part two is, are you looking at, because we do fund significant programs in the city through FCSS, are we looking at do you anticipate additional asks for either enhanced services or new services as a result to collaborate with this opportunity?
Thank you for those questions. So in terms of FCSS funding for a model like this, our funding is prevention in nature, so it would be dependent on what an organization who's running this would need funding for, whether they would qualify or not. I don't have the exact numbers from the models in our province of how many are municipal run and how many are not. And I could definitely, through an information request, get that information to you.
Thank you very much. And then I guess lastly, is there an integration with models like this with AHS? And I know there's work in the high schools being done by counselors. So what does that kind of look like?
So one of the models, again, I'll use Grand Prairie, is got a organization called Kickstand that has services on site. And Kickstand is what was old provincial funding that was available for communities to have youth hubs or youth centers for localized one-stop supports. And when the funding through the province changed, they moved all that funding to an organization called Kickstand. So the funding's still available to communities. And the intent is that you would have a youth hub or a youth space where you would have counseling available, Alberta Health Services available, children's services available, medical, all on one site. So young people walk in the door and get all the supports that they need in one space, one stop shop. Safe.
Great, thank you very much. I'll move it to Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As somebody that's worked in children's services and is very familiar with a variety of different youth homes, I think there's maybe a fear amongst council that we're going to create a high rise and that we're going to have youth that are going to actually set up and live there. And yeah, I know, but there is this questioning in relation to the fact that potentially we're going to have a high rise when in fact I've worked in youth homes. I've worked with youth that are in the street. I have apprehended youth that are 13 years old, and you don't put them in a institution necessarily unless it's a institution of last choice. I'm assuming, right? I mean, most likely what's happening is, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the question would be, from your experience, so when you, most of these youth that are in that vulnerable age, 13, 14, they're usually they're in a transitional home because that's kind of a emergency shelter needed and required, and then quickly provided into either kinship care or potentially moving them into a foster home or reunited with a family member. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, so we're not putting a 13-year-old in there and then watching them graduate at the age of 24. No,
Correct.
thank you. That's what I think. I mean, I've seen a lot. I haven't seen the kickstand or I haven't seen the Grand Prairie home. Like you're right, Mr. Mayor, a lot of times these organizations like McMahon Youth and Medicine Hat, what they do is they buy a abandoned duplex, or they can buy a abandoned apartment, and they then work with, well, previously it was the provincial government, but now it's kickstand funding in order to provide different services. But really, it's an idea that it's really quickly in, quickly out, unless you're on a support for financial assistance, which is usually 18 to 24. And then those are usually out in the community, you're provided all sorts of services. So you really have a mix of potentially having a building that has, and I'm just anticipating this, that has maybe one floor of maybe services, maybe we could offer, maybe the provider would offer office space to AHS or Children's Services or FCSS, so that that worker would be there to connect them. And then there would be maybe beds on the second floor is usually my involvement. So second, third floor, maybe, but most likely it's just either 1 story or 2 stories. That's usually my experience.
That's been my experience as well. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, really it's, I was on the youth transition, I was on this whole homelessness task force. And yes, you're right. I mean, when we were looking at some of these things, I think back in 2018, what we found was, yeah, there was that missing middle, or probably missing kind of services for youth, whereas other services were available for seniors, for domestic violence. But at that time, we were only looking at 18 to 20. So it saddens me really to realize that those numbers have maybe even tripled. And for somebody that walks through Lions Park in the summer, I see it. For somebody who goes to the mall, I've seen it. For somebody who visited the community hub, I've seen it. So it's sad. And I don't think that the need has necessarily gone away. Thanks. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Bermansky has a follow-up question.
Thank you. One more question. With the Kickstand program now, I guess it's called, is that not coordinated with FCSS in many communities where it can work in conjunction with, or not?
It definitely could be. It's different services. It's not just prevention-based services like FCSS. So Kickstand could be having a crisis counselor and mental health supports and services and that kind of stuff. But certainly working together, absolutely working together.
Is there certain communities that it's incorporated into the same building space and then you can get support through that for your FCSS? Like in conjunction, something that you may not be able to provide in that building?
Yeah, so in Grand Prairie, that's the model. They have the Kickstand services on site, and then other services can come and support young people there. So FCSS could come and have an office available to meet with young people, and or Children's Services, and or many others that may not be part of who's been hired with Kickstand funding. So you absolutely could be looking at both, and absolutely the more supports working together, the better the outcome for that young person.
Thank you. That's my last question, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes questions from council, so I appreciate the presentation, and we'll look to continue this possibly through a combination of in-camera and public going forward, so thank you. With that, I don't believe we have any emergent items. Anybody have any IRs? Notice? Oh, we do, okay, and we will move it to,
Yes.
yeah, Councillor Clark.
I have an IR. I've asked to please provide fire response time data by neighborhood for the years ending 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. For each neighborhood and year, please include the average, median, and 90th percentile response times, the number of fire responses, and the methodology used to calculate response times, including time points measured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Don't believe so. Okay, with that, we can call adjournment to the Standing Committee of the Whole meeting at, what time are we at here? 10:40. I'll just ask, maybe we take a 10-minute break here, 15 minutes, and then we'll go into the special council meeting right after. Thank you.